So we're going to finish up tonight this climate crisis video series, but I thought it might be helpful just to talk for a couple of moments about the scriptural connection to some of the ideas that are being presented in the video. The video series is not Christian per se; it's environmental, and it's people that are concerned about the changes that are taking place. You can do an entire theology of environmental stewardship from the scriptures. There is different studies that take different things into account. But if you take a look at your handout, what you're going to find is I just want to point out a couple of things. But before I do that, I want to remind you that next Wednesday, we're going to start a new study. So we're going to talk about the book of Galatians, and we're going to probably, there's 6 chapters in Galatians. We'll probably take 2 weeks per chapter. So I think I'm going to outline it to be kind of like a 12-week study. And I don't know if you know this, but what we are given in the book of Galatians is not a later series of writings from the Apostle Paul. Sometimes we might think that because Galatians is grouped together with the prison epistles. But the book of Galatians might be, if it's not Galatians, it's First Thessalonians, Paul's earliest writing in the New Testament, which we are given kind of the earliest concepts he has of the transitions that are taking place from Judaism into what is not quite fully developed Christianity yet, but we are given this contrast between the law and grace, and Galatians has a lot to say about that. So next week, we're going to get an introduction to that. And here's kind of how I'm summarizing it. The earliest concepts of grace from the pen of the Apostle Paul that became a tipping point for the development of Christianity. And I think that's a good way of summarizing not only this letter, but the ministry of the Apostle Paul, kind of pushing Judaism to a point where it's going to become Christianity within a number of years. So anyway, so for tonight, as we finish this study, I want to give you just a couple things by way of consideration. So when you look at some of the scriptural connections to environmentalism, you always have to kind of begin with creation. And here's 3 statements that are made from the Psalms, from the prophets, and from the Torah. So I think we're familiar with Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And the idea behind that is this is God owns the universe. We don't own it, which implies that we can't do whatever we want to it or ruin it. Secondly, God's perspective on his creation is that it is very good. Genesis 1:31. A lot of times what I have found is within evangelical Christianity, the earth, nature, the power of the creation around us seems to get minimized a little bit because there's an overemphasis of going to heaven after you die. God doesn't really care about this world, that type of thing. You won't find that in Scripture. Everywhere God creates and displays his pleasure with creation is something that is tied into this idea of stewardship, giving Adam, giving Eve the commission to be his representatives on earth. And then finally, out of Jeremiah 10:12, God made the earth by his power, but I like this second line. He founded the earth by his wisdom. And I would suggest that if he creates the world within wisdom, it also behooves us to use wisdom and how we care for it as well. There are several things that are kind of tied to scriptural environmental stewardship, and that is, who is God as creator? Of course, when you look back into the Old Testament, there's a plethora of different gods that people worship. It becomes more apparent that Yahweh displays his power and is recognized finally by Moses in that burning bush episode. What is the earth as God's creation? Is it valued the same as the rest of the universe and different planets and solar systems, or is there something special about the Earth, reflected in the Garden of Eden, something that was made to benefit mankind? And then who are we as God's creatures? Are we simply individuals that are to use it and abuse it, or are we to take care of it? Sort of like when we give our kids the opportunity to get their first car, are they taking care of it? Are they not taking care of it? That type of thing. A couple of quick things here. The value of creation. God is intimately involved in his creation because he values it. Second, mankind as mediators are God's representatives on earth. Thirdly, mankind is posed between two realities, both God and the world. So we share in both, we are united to both, and we can't live apart from either, really. So I like this Amish proverb. Not many things that I have run across that put it as succinctly as this, but there's an old Amish proverb that says, "We did not inherit the land from our fathers." That's the way we normally think, but we are borrowing it from our children. In other words, it is something that behooves us to take care of it for the generations that follow. So I think those things are important to keep in mind in light of the information we're receiving. Again, what we're doing is just trying to educate ourselves a little bit on this topic. And there's not a whole lot of episode notes. Just down at the bottom of the handout, there's 3 main points there. But I'm going to switch screens, and then we're going to take a look at the video, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss anything that is notable in our final video together. So let's switch this around a little bit, close that, and we're going to open this up and get this started.
Hey friends, welcome back. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
Hi, welcome. Bienvenue dans l'épisode 3. We're so glad you're here.
2, 3. Yay.
Vous êtes encore là. Ah mais ça c'est génial. Alors bienvenue dans l'épisode numéro 3. Hello and welcome back to you all for this third and final time together.
Yeah, we're super touched that you're back, and obviously there's a screen between you and us, but all along we've tried to picture you in your home or with your colleagues or in your community, because we feel a special connection with anyone who has the courage to really look into the situation and go there, as we did on day 1, and who grapples with the deeper stories behind this issue, as we did on day 2.
And now this is the episode we were most looking forward to, day 3. And today it's all about the question, what do we do now? What can I do? What can you do? What are you willing to do? And the beauty of it is that we each get to find out the answer for ourselves. I cannot answer it for you, and you don't know the answer for me either.
But in order not to start from a blank page, which can be a bit overwhelming, we've asked Scarlett and Frank and Ashley and everyone else you've already met how they got going and what they decided to do.
And the format for today is the same. First, the film, and then the conversation in your group. And this is the episode that gives us the most energy. So we hope it's going to be the same for you.
And yeah, talking about energy, we'll need it because, the challenge we're facing is just enormous. As you know, we need to shift multiple systems as fast as we can.
To avoid the kind of suffering we talked about on the first day, we need to tip our energy systems, which means stop building more oil, gas, or coal infrastructure. Reduce what we need by tracking down waste and making our homes more energy efficient, and replace fossil fuels as quickly as possible with cheap wind and solar. And then electrify everything, cars, trucks, and heating systems. We need to tip our food system and how we use land. It means reducing the staggering amount of food that's wasted. It means we switch to regenerative agriculture and stop propping up industrial farming with subsidies. It means more plant proteins and less meat. And we need to tip our consumption and production system. If we want to avoid hitting the wall, we need to move away from creating false needs for disposable stuff and towards building things to last, to be shared and recycled. And on top of it, we need to do it fast. Today, this is how much warming gas we emit per year. But if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming and avoid triggering the booby traps, scientists have calculated we need to bring this down to half by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. Net meaning whatever we still emit, we also draw down, for example, through regenerative farming and forest restoration.
So from 60 to 30 to 0, it's a huge challenge. And the same urgency applies to stopping pollution and the collapse of living ecosystems. It's all hands on deck from now on. It's not something we can do in passing.
That's our challenge, right? That's the mission that our generation has been given. And the question is, will we individually and collectively, will we accept that mission?
So whenever I kind of like have that overwhelming feeling, I just think that if I'm not going to do it, no one is, and it's better to try than to just give up. Because if everyone gave up, we'd be in a much worse place than we are right now. So I think that instead of like letting that fear consume me and let me stop, I have to use it for good because I have the ability to do that. You can't just like observe other people being hurt and having their lives destroyed and not say anything, because we have a responsibility to make up for the damage that our countries have done.
Ce qui est vraiment difficile, c'est le moment où tu t'es pris le mur de climat en plein dans la tête et que tu sais pas par où commencer, que tu commences à culpabiliser sur toutes tes actions. Mais peut-être le passage le plus dur, c'est d'aller trouver quelques personnes bienveillantes autour de toi qui s'engagent de manière positive. Donc, pas des personnes déprimantes, vraiment des personnes qui vont t'apporter de l'énergie. Et là, à partir du moment où tu seras connecté à elles et où tu vas commencer à agir, là, c'est gagné.
Pour moi, en tout cas, si on attend les grands dirigeants et qu'on attend tout le temps que ce soit descendant, il n'y a rien qui se fait. Donc pour moi, il faut mettre un coup de pied dans la fourmilière et puis que tout le monde se mette au boulot à son niveau et avec son envie et ses convictions en fait. Il ne faut pas faire quelque chose qu'on n'a pas envie parce qu'au final, on ne va pas prendre plaisir. Aujourd'hui, c'est ça en fait qui est important, c'est de prendre plaisir dans ce qu'on fait et dans ce qu'on met en place.
Now that I have a grandson, that is a huge motivator. I hope he tells his kids, Grandpa was really, really a positive impact on the world. I don't ever want to give him an excuse or reason to say, well, he tried, but he just went back to his old ways. I think the biggest elephant in the room is how. Where do we start?
Some people say the problem is so big, only the government can solve it. And during World War II, we saw how powerful governments can be to mobilize mass action to build the enormous war infrastructure that was needed. So those same people may say, me at home, recycling or changing light bulbs, that won't cut it.
And other people say, by the time the government, wakes up, it's going to be too late. Or I don't trust the government to impose that kind of actions. It's up to us individuals to step up.
And in our opinion, it's not one or the other, it's both. We need both and actually much more.
Because these are only two among several other options. We can also play a powerful role in our communities, in our workplace, and through activism. And we'll go through each of these 5 areas one at a time. And we'll start with what we can do individually at home, because for a lot of us, that's sort of the obvious place to start.
To help tip the energy system, we can switch our electricity contract to a supplier with 100% renewable energy, like Ashley and Peter and Ophelia did.
We can push our landlord to replace the furnace with a heat pump. We can save on our monthly bills by adding insulation to our home, like Ophelia did when she bought her house.
And for those of us who need a car, when it's time to replace it, let's get an electric one. They're getting cheaper all the time.
And it doesn't need to be fancy. Like, we bought this used, 3-year-old plug-in hybrid, and we calculated that driving on electricity saves us almost $2,000 a year. That's £1,700.
So guess what? If I don't have to do all of this traveling for unnecessary reason, hey, why do I need a car? And if I go put solar panels on my house, I don't have to pay a utility company. And as a matter of fact, the utility company has to pay me.
Research has shown that our actions are contagious. When one person puts up solar panels on a roof, suddenly others start popping up in the neighborhood.
And when it comes to tipping the food system, here's an easy way to start that makes a difference. It's for us to simply remember how precious food is and waste less of it. And then also, if it's available where you live, you can buy weekly food shares directly, from a local and regenerative farmer, or from a farmer's market. And if you have access to a garden, well, you can grow your own food.
Je dis, moi, aujourd'hui, je roule pas sur l'or. Ok, j'ai une maison et j'ai un job, mais pour autant, à la fin du mois, je dois quand même faire attention. J'ai fait un potager dans mon jardin. Donc déjà, ça me permet de ne pas dépenser d'argent dans l'achat de fruits et légumes, parce que tout vient de mon jardin. J'ai aussi décidé d'arrêter de gaspiller, de faire du gaspillage alimentaire. Et donc j'ai adopté 3 poules qui sont dans mon jardin, que je nourris par mes restes. Alors voici Kim, Chloé et Courtney, en référence à la famille Kardashian. En compensation, elles me donnent des œufs. Donc j'ai arrêté d'acheter des œufs et les œufs, ils sont là tous les matins, j'ai 3 œufs bien frais.
Like I can say for myself, going to the farmer's market instead of going to some mega, grocery store, it's so much more fulfilling to know the people who grow the food that I eat.
And when it comes to consumption, you can decide to buy your clothing secondhand.
Parfois, j'arrive au bureau avec une nouvelle jupe ou une nouvelle robe et mes collègues me disent « Oh, super, j'adore !» Et là, c'est le plaisir de dire « Bah écoute, je l'ai acheté d'occasion sur Emmaüs, par exemple. » Et puis maintenant, j'arrive à essayer de plus acheter de neuf, sauf de temps en temps des craquages, je l'admets, mais de moins en moins.
And you can go even further, like Ophélie, who found for free almost all the furniture for her house.
Aujourd'hui, le meuble, il est plus beau, il est plus au goût du jour, on le met à la poubelle. Pourquoi en fait? On prend de la peinture, on le ponce, on le refait et on le remet au goût du jour. En fait, ça, c'est tout à fait faisable. 20% de mon habitation, c'est de l'achat. Et tout le reste, les 80%, c'est que du recyclage. En fait. Et ça, c'est une immense fierté.
A few years ago, we gave ourselves a challenge to buy everything secondhand. Right?
Almost everything.
Yeah, not food, not socks and underwear. One thing that we didn't expect was how fun this would be. Like it turns everything we buy into sort of a little treasure hunt. And now everything we have, has a little story. It's no longer just stuff. We also realize that we end up buying quite a bit less now that we are no longer, just ordering stuff, online on a whim. And we tend to focus on things that we really like and that really have value to us.
So just in this one category, our life at home, there are a lot of things that we can do. And I'm sure that some of you already do quite a few of them, or even most of them. And this is probably too small to read, but don't worry. This list and all the other ideas that we'll share today are on the week's website. So let's move to the next topic now, community.
Think of the communities that you're a part of, the communities that matter to you. Maybe it's your family or your neighborhood, or maybe it's your gym or your place of worship or your kids' school or your hunting and fishing buddies or your union or your salsa lessons. I mean, what have you. We're all part of different communities, and every one of them might be a place where you could get the ball rolling.
And maybe you can create a project to put up solar panels, say on your church roof or your mosque or your synagogue or your sports club. And how about sharing household items with everyone on your street or your building? Instead of having 20 waffle makers on one street, you could use your neighbors. And it's not just the things you share, it's also meeting people that you would have otherwise never met. It's creating a deeper sense of belonging.
Or maybe it's exciting to join or start a tool library or a toy library or a repair cafe or a community garden in your neighborhood. Or get together with fellow students and parents and get your school to make an ambitious climate plan. Or maybe, you want to start by sitting, in your backyard with your neighbors and have a beer and, start brainstorming on what you could do. That's often like, the first step to something that ends up becoming quite big.
And again, there are so many possible things to do with a group you already belong to or an existing group that's out there that you could join. Because yeah, you don't have to start the whole thing by yourself if it's not your thing. So there are all the things we can do at home in our community. And then there's everything we can do at work.
Do you remember Ray Anderson and how he had this turning point in his life that transformed his company? Well, we need thousands of companies to do, the same thing, become less destructive, and at some point, maybe even, regenerative. Which means that we need people at all levels, CEOs, managers, employees, who dedicate themselves, like Ray Anderson, to do whatever they can to transform their workplace from within.
That's what Pauline did. She works in human resources at the headquarters of a huge firm in Paris. It all started with an email she wrote.
Ça a commencé avec Gilda, qui est maintenant un ami, qui était un collègue. Cet email, on l'a envoyé à quelques personnes de notre réseau en disant on veut que notre entreprise s'engage plus vite, plus fort sur les enjeux environnementaux. Et on a reçu alors d'abord une centaine de signatures, puis maintenant on doit être à 250 quelques mois après. C'est ce qu'il y a de beau, on se faisait la réflexion de découvrir qu'il y a des personnes qui ont une forte sensibilité environnementale ou sociale qu'on n'aurait pas trop soupçonné. Et ce qu'on avait fait dans le formulaire de signature, c'est qu'on avait demandé sur quel sujet les personnes voulaient s'engager. Et donc après, on a créé des groupes avec les différents thèmes.
These groups took on a number of projects. For example, one group looked into refurbishing and reusing large water pumps. Another one met with the CEO to rally him to their ambition, and another engaged with the union.
C'est que, en fédérant des personnes qui initialement se sentaient toutes seules dans leur entreprise et se sentaient peut-être désarmées devant la crise écologique, bah finalement on arrive à une masse énorme de personnes qui est énergisée par ce mouvement, par cette action, par ce sens qui est trouvé, et qui en plus est capable de peser là où avant c'était une personne toute seule désarmée. Ce qui se passe, c'est que on sent les frémissements qui commencent à se faire de plus en plus gros dans la société.
The CEO is supportive of their work because it helps him achieve his own climate goals, but it wasn't a given.
On s'est mis d'accord juste avant d'envoyer l'email. Est-ce que si on se fait virer pour ça, on regrettera? J'ai dit non. Donc, dit allez, on veut le faire. Et j'ai toujours cette question de qu'est-ce que vont me dire mes enfants si j'en ai un jour? Maman, t'as rien fait. Et j'ai envie de pouvoir leur dire oui, je sais que j'ai plein de choses à me reprocher, mais j'ai quand même essayé de faire ça, ça, ça. Ou j'ai plus qu'essayé, j'ai fait ça, ça, ça.
Pauline didn't wait for a signal from the top to get going, and this seems to be happening in more and more places. Just in France, groups from within 150 large companies are now meeting regularly to learn from each other. They call themselves Les Collectifs, and Pauline joined the core organizing team.
Aujourd'hui, il se passe quelque chose, et je parle de la France. Les entreprises, en tout cas les salariés à l'intérieur des entreprises, se fédèrent en groupe, et c'est quand même dingue de se dire que le phénomène se duplique. Il y a ce truc magique de on est connectés, on avance ensemble, et ça remonte notre niveau d'énergie durablement. On travaille ensemble, on sait que ce qu'on fait est légitime, on sait pourquoi on le fait, on a les mêmes envies. Enfin, il n'y a pas d'activité qui porte plus que celle-là.
A number of such collectives sprang up inside a company called Decathlon, the world's largest sport retailer with 100,000 employees. One of these groups is training colleagues about the reality of climate change. Another group met the company's top leadership and shared with them a presentation they had carefully prepared. They convinced the leadership to aim for a much faster drop in CO2 emissions, and one brain was chosen to try this out before extending it to the whole company.
These days, people throughout the organization are rolling up their sleeves. Products are getting redesigned from the ground up to be less resource intensive, to last longer, to be repairable, and ultimately recyclable. To speed up the transition, the company now measures its sales from the circular economy separately from the revenue from the old linear economy. In France, every 3 months, employees in the stores with the highest share of the circular economy get a nice bonus in their salary. As you can imagine, it sparked a lot of innovations, buying back items from customers to resell them, creating dedicated areas in the stores for secondhand items, and renting sports equipment instead of selling it.
It's still early days, but when things get measured and incentives get put in place, it's starting to become the real deal. And what's interesting to me is that surprisingly often, it seems that when employees, champion this kind of change, their CEOs and top leadership join in. Because, they start to see the writing on the wall too, right? They don't want to be the company that's left behind, whose business model is still tied to, the old story when there's a new story coming up.
And really, when you think about it, every job can be a climate job. A journalist can write about the climate urgency. A teacher can transform a school. A waiter can inspire that restaurant to buy organic ingredients.
A taxi driver can switch to electric cars. Postal workers can turn the giant roofs of their sorting centers into an organic farm. Faith leaders might invite a whole community to care for creation, or even come together across religions to stop a local fossil fuel project. And a lawyer can fight for the environment.
Das, was mich in meiner Arbeit am meisten motiviert, ist dieses Gefühl David gegen Goliath. Wir sind ganz klein, wir sind ein kleines Büro und unsere Gegner, das sind die ganz Großen. Wenn es gelingt, ist es ein tolles Erlebnis. Wir haben vor etwa 10 Jahren gekämpft gegen mehrere Kohlekraftwerke, die gebaut werden sollten. Ein solches Kraftwerk hat so viel CO2-Ausstoß wie ein ganzes Bundesland in Deutschland. Und es ist uns gelungen, 5 Kraftwerke zu verhindern. Wenn ich daran denke, was das für heute bedeutet, wie viel weniger CO2 und Umweltschaden dadurch verursacht wird, dann kann man sagen, gut, an dieser Stelle haben wir tatsächlich etwas erreicht.
Peter was also hired to fight a gigantic pig factory where 70,000 pigs would have been fattened in concrete warehouses the size of a village. It would create a lot of pollution and drive family farms out of business.
Furchtbar für die Tiere, furchtbar für die Umwelt und alles. Und dann war ich mit meiner Familie in Urlaub, wir waren in der Natur. Ich bekomme einen Anruf von meinem Büro sagt, ihr habt diesen Fall gewonnen. Und es war ein solches Gefühl der Freude und der Erleichterung, dass das tatsächlich geklappt hat. Es gibt diesen Einfluss, aber er ist Teil eines Puzzles. Also es gibt andere Teile, die andere Menschen gemacht haben und wir kommen insgesamt voran. Immer noch viel zu langsam, aber manchmal gibt es auch ganz große Schritte, die ganz auf einmal gehen.
Peter could make more money as a partner in a big law firm, but he decided early on to take on environmental cases, and he now has a string of impressive successes. That's what really makes him rich in life.
Ich arbeite deshalb als Anwalt in diesem Thema, weil ich Fälle bearbeite, hinter denen ich tatsächlich stehe. Das heißt, das Ziel, um das es dabei geht, ist auch mein Ziel. Und das ist viel mehr wert, als wenn ich das Doppelte verdienen würde auf der anderen Seite. Das ist ein großer Luxus und es ist eine große Motivation für die Arbeit.
I don't know about you, but these stories give me energy and hope. And if you work in an organization, think about what that could mean and what you could do. Imagine going to work and making things happen like Pauline and Peter did. like how good might it feel in the morning, when you get up? I would say, the best way to find out is, talk with some colleagues, get the conversation going and see where it goes.
And perhaps for some of you, you may realize that the place you work just isn't for you anymore. And you'll take the leap to find a work that is closer to the news story. That's exactly what Yense did. He was a professional truck driver.
I was working in the oil and gas industry for about 6 years because of financial reasons. The oil field is a great way to make money. There's guys out there that were in their early 20s making 6 figures.
But then he realized something was off.
I was looking at the numbers and just seeing how many barrels of oil we were hauling, and it was insane. Then we had like 4 spills within a week. I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, like what are we doing? What's going on here? And I really started to think about it. I'm like, you know what? I don't know that I really want to be a part of this anymore. So we talked about it, we prayed about it, and I made that move. I decided, okay, I'm done. So I resigned from the oil field. My end goal, my deal with God is that when it's my time and he calls me up there, I want him to be able to say, well done, good and faithful servant. That is my goal. So I decided to segue to the electric vehicle world.
Yancy took his expertise and is now using it in his new job with an electric truck company.
I feel very blessed. I feel very happy, humble, not only because of the fact that it's an electric vehicle company, but people that I work with as well. We all share that same common goal to help make the world a better place. It makes me feel good inside. It goes back to religion to me in a way that I'm going to do my part to try to help heal the planet, not destroy it.
Ophélie also experienced a turning point when she was in school and found that there was a way that she could combine the work she loves with the news story.
À mes 18 ans, je me suis orientée vers le bâtiment. Je rêvais d'être à l'époque chef de chantier. Et la première année de bâtiment où je fais un stage, je suis dans le gros œuvre, du béton partout. Partout, 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 partout du béton. Mais c'est tout, pour moi c'est comme ça, c'est mes études et puis il faut continuer. Et puis c'était pas trop mon fort, j'étais dernière de la promo, je galérais à fond dans mes cours, je ramais. En deuxième année, en stage de fin d'études, je fais un stage dans une entreprise de construction bois. Et là, révélation, j'adore ce que je fais. Et donc, je poursuis mes études et je fais une troisième année. La troisième année, je l'oriente dans la construction écologique. Et donc, liée à tous les matériaux écolos. Et puis, la grosse révélation pour moi, en fait, parce que je finis première de la promo alors que j'ai ramené pendant 2 ans. Et là, je finis première de promo et voilà. Et j'adore ce que je fais, en fait.
After she graduated, Ophélie joined a construction company that focuses on eco-friendly insulation, solar panels, and heat pumps.
Je pourrais pas travailler dans une entreprise qui se soucie pas du climat parce qu'en fait, c'est mon avenir. Si ça colle pas avec ma raison d'être, je vais pas m'y sentir bien et aller travailler avec la boule au ventre tous les jours, c'est pas possible en fait. J'ai besoin de me sentir bien et j'ai besoin d'être alignée avec mes valeurs et avec ce que je suis.
Whatever your job, this is a place where you spend a ton of time and where you could make an outsized difference. And I like to think that if enough of us speak up, it will become normal for companies not only to try to reduce the harm they do, but also have the ambition to regenerate and heal their communities and the living world. So that's it for work. And now on to activism.
We can change institutions from within, but outside pressure is often critical too. Take fossil fuels. It's incredible that right now there are still companies and banks investing billions to try and build more pipelines or refineries instead of renewable energy. All big historic changes have come with people visibly standing up and showing it's time to move to a better story. In 2018, a number of climate movements of unprecedented scale popped up throughout the world. They brought millions to the street, demanding that politicians meet the urgency.
So I would say when I grew up a bit, 11, 12, I started understanding that me alone wasn't going to change this. But I knew that I had to carry on. I had to start getting other people to do this with me on a large scale. So in 2019, when I was 13, I decided to start organising climate strikes. So I got in touch with people from across the UK. We all spoke about our plans, about how we do this. And we had our first one in February, and then we had another in March. We shouldn't have education, but it should be a human right. I think most people care about climate change, and it's just that people don't understand how they can sort of speak out against it, especially as young people. We gave people an opportunity to be heard, to make a difference, and that's why they mobilised, because we gave them the opportunity. Lots of politicians told us we should stay in school, but our response has always been, we can catch up on lessons, but we can't catch up on the destruction done to the planet, which is why we're here in our hundreds of thousands to show you that you have to act.
When school children all over the world started striking for the climate, Peter was also inspired to do something.
Und ich hatte das Gefühl, dass aber auch Anwältinnen und Anwälte und Richterinnen und Juristen Teil dieser Bewegung sein sollten. Nicht immer nur im Büro, sondern tatsächlich nach außen sichtbar. Und dann habe ich Freunde angesprochen und habe gesagt, wollen wir das machen zusammen? Und ich hatte sofort 10, 20, 30 Juristinnen, die ich kenne, die gesagt haben, das ist eine gute Idee, wir machen das. Wir haben vor etwa 2,5 Jahren damit angefangen und sind jetzt über 200 Juristinnen, die mittlerweile allein in Deutschland dabei sind.
They call themselves Lawyers for Future. They support youth climate movements with all the free legal advice they need. They help lawyers find a way to get involved and show up for climate action. Next to large national climate movements, there's local activism springing up everywhere too. By now, there's no plan for a new pipeline or a factory farm that isn't met with local resistance.
Activism is a big word that makes some people uncomfortable. But really what it means is ordinary people coming together and making sure that their town, their infrastructure, and their laws work for them.
And shortly after we filmed Frank in Memphis, he and other community organizers in the city managed to stop a crude oil pipeline from running beneath the historic neighborhood of Boxtown, as well as several other predominantly Black communities.
We got a partial protection from our city council about the cleanliness of our drinking waters. And so everybody that watches this message, I encourage you to keep going, keep fighting. We are winning victories. So let's keep pushing, let's keep moving, and let's keep fighting for our lives.
Ashley also found herself diving into activism.
As a physician, I wasn't leveraging that tool of being a doctor because, you know, that profession still has a certain social influence, which I really see as my gift that I have to offer the greater climate movement. You know, if I had other skills, I would, you know, use those, but that's a unique skill that I can bring. Hi, Sunny. So we started a nonprofit called Climate Health Now. And our mission is that every health professional in California is part of the climate movement. So we started with the climate strike, you know, there were maybe 30 members who showed up in their white coats. And last I checked, we had about 492 members who have joined Climate Health Now.
Recently, they had a big win too. Their involvement forced 2 huge oil refineries in the state to adopt a technology that will drastically reduce air pollution and save lives.
It was the first time that I really felt like we had a hand in creating this outcome. And that feeling was so satisfying and fulfilling that it's like the best, you know, the best reward you could really have is that feeling of having been a part of a success by working together.
Joining one of these groups or movements can be incredibly fun and rewarding and make us feel the power that we have. You know, we're part of a bigger group that is, you know, making this seesaw tip.
And if this is something you might consider, well, there are lots of options to choose from. There are movements for moms, for grandparents, for teachers, for doctors, for lawyers, for army veterans, for school children.
There are large national and international movements that range the spectrum from progressive to conservative, you know, from Extinction Rebellion, Sunrise, Climate Reality to Republic Yen and the American Conservation Coalition. There are hunter and angler movements like Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, and Conservation Hawks that see climate change and the destruction of wetlands as a threat to traditions that have been passed down for generations.
So whoever you are, there is probably a movement out there of people like you.
So that's activism. And finally, there's politics and government.
We've seen in the past that when times are ripe and the news story becomes strong enough, governments suddenly put their weight behind it, which can help the whole system tip much faster.
And the things we can do here are pretty simple. Vote, organize, work with politicians, and run for office.
And for the next few election cycles, let's tell our politicians, whatever party we vote for, that our vote goes to the candidate who is the most ambitious in addressing the climate crisis. And where it's possible, let's vote in party primaries to decide who even gets on the ballot. And let's pay attention and vote at the local level. While the media focuses on national races, so many crucial decisions for the environment get made locally.
And I think we really need to recognize the power that we have. I think we need to remember that the politicians that we elect are accountable to us. They have to answer to us.
Ahead of elections, we can go one step further and help the best candidate, you know, with phone banks and through social media. Or like Scarlett, you know, who decided to go door to door in England after she found out about the climate crisis when she was just 10 years old.
For a few months, I stayed learning and talking to everybody I could, every adult I could find. Who are you going to vote for? Why? And then I decided that there were two political parties that I supported because of their climate stance. And I asked my parents, can I leaflet for them? Can I give out leaflets for these parties? They said, no, you're 10. That's weird. You can't just knock on people's doors. And then I begged them. And then eventually they settled on a compromise, which was I could go and do it, but my dad had to stay with me. Which poor him, because he wasn't in any political parties, but he had his 10-year-old daughter knocking on people's doors saying, hi, can you please vote for these people because we need a prime minister who's going to give us the decarbonizations that we deserve.
Given the urgency, we can also run for office. It can be for a local planning board that few people know about, but that makes critical decisions on land use, or a school board, or the town council.
And then we can work with whatever politicians are in place. Scarlett got a member of the UK Parliament, you know, whom she met when she was organizing student climate strikes in Birmingham, to support her writing a bill. The bill will make sure that students are taught skills to deal with a scorching planet in all schools and vocational training programs throughout the UK.
Members of Parliament started debating climate education in Parliament. Then just a few weeks later, our bill was read in Parliament and it passed with a 100% of the vote.
The bill has more hurdles to pass in the House of Commons and House of Lords. But, you know, pretty soon throughout the UK, you know, students could be better prepared for what's coming.
So at home, at work, in our community, there's so much we can do. The question is not so much what can I do? The real question is, where do I start? Or where do we start as a group of friends or colleagues? Or how do we take things a step further if you're already doing a lot?
And another question that you might be asking yourselves, given the urgency, is what could I do that will have the most impact? Well, when we looked into this for ourselves, we were surprised to realize that, you know, some things have a much bigger impact than others, like 10 or 20 times more. And so if you're interested, you know, you can check out the list of action on the week's website, and we've highlighted 10 actions that tend to matter most.
And speaking of making a difference, sometimes the hardest step is the first one. And I imagine this has happened to you before too. We see a movie or read something that inspires us, and we want to do something about it. But then in the end, we get sidetracked. And it's one thing to want to do something, and it's another one to actually do it.
And let's be real, right? This could happen after the week too, right? We're all busy, like there's so much going on in our lives that can distract us, even for something as critical as all of this.
So what could get in the way? We talked to lots of people and we identified 5 things that could show up and get in our way. So we want to share them with you. First, there's this small cynical voice in us that sometimes whispers, whatever I do, it won't change anything anyway.
Or another way to put that is like, I'm too small to make a difference.
Or 2, there is this other voice that can hold us back. I'm too busy. I don't have time. Or 3, I'm already doing a lot. I'm already doing my part.
4, there's things that I'm simply not prepared to give up. And finally, 5, I'm not a tree hugger, right? If I go all in, my friends might think that I've suddenly become weird.
So quick question for you. Does any of these 5 things resonate in particular with you? If that's the case, feel free to raise your hand or nod your head. Look around, you're probably not the only one.
I certainly know each of these voices well, right? They used to pop up, regularly. For example, this cynical voice, like how can whatever I do really make a difference, right? And that's when I try to remember the seesaw. The world won't be saved by one person, a superhero, or by anyone else. It's because I do whatever I can and many others do what they can that we can get there, right? Now, let's take a closer look at the last 2 on the list because they are perhaps the most important to crack.
And let's start with this one. There are some things I'm not prepared to give up. Perhaps you're thinking, well, I love shopping for new clothes, or I don't want to give up meat or fly less. And yes, we get it. Like, no one wants to be shamed out of things they enjoy.
This is, the old story of guilt and shame, and I'm tired of it. This is not about, sacrificing to save the planet, even though people say this all the time, right? It's about finding what is going to contribute the most to our lives and to those we love. Like, remember, like we're working towards a better story, right? Not a story of drudgery. And I don't know if you remember this list, right? Why on earth would we focus on the 2 or 3 things that are hardest for us and start there when there's so many other good things we can do?
And this is not an excuse to do only easy or small things. Saying no to plastic straws is not going to cut it. Instead, let's be honest with ourselves about the scale of this crisis to motivate us and get started. And then let's choose things that make a real difference and that feel exciting.
And, for the 2 or 3 things that do feel like a sacrifice, maybe you'll do them at some point down the road when you're ready for them and they no longer feel hard.
Avant, sur la nourriture, je mangeais presque un steak par jour à la cantine parce que j'adore la viande rouge. Et j'ai arrêté toute la viande et tout le poisson aussi. Souvent, les bons repas, c'est des moments. Donc, les moments restent les moments partagés entre amis.
Moi, j'utilise énormément la voiture. Je vais devoir travailler dans les années à venir, mais je le ferai quand je serai prête à le faire. Et aujourd'hui, je me flagelle pas de ça.
For us, this is not a purity contest, right? The goal is not to be perfect. No one is. The goal is to move forward, and to move forward quickly, powerfully, and joyfully, and to make a difference. So please, no, I really should do this or I should do that.
And I'm going to give you an example. For the last 2 years, Fred and I have become really, really aware of all the plastic packaging that we consume. And we're finding small ways to reduce it. But there's still so much, it drives us nuts, right? And yeah, in 6 months or in a year, we'll really look into it. Right now, we're so busy with the films that we've decided not to beat ourselves up about all that plastic, even if it bothers us.
So the real question is, what would give you joy and make a difference? Right? For some people, it's starting with something small to get a quick win, right? Because that's exciting, right? For example, switch your electricity contract to a 100% green electricity supplier. It will meaningfully reduce your carbon footprint, and it might take an hour of research on the internet and then an hour of paperwork. In 2 hours, you've got yourself something to celebrate. Or you could get your whole street to use the sharing stickers, right? That's done in a weekend.
For other people, it's the other way around. What gives them a kick is to tackle a large challenge right away, completely insulate their house or push their apartment complex to do so, or go for a big initiative at work.
Maybe what will give you a kick is to meet new people, right? And then you can do an online search, to find out about local initiatives that you can join. And maybe like Yancy, you want to really research things first before jumping to action.
Right now, my climate journey is in the beginning stages. I have so much to learn, but there are outlets online that I've researched, that I've looked at, that I've become a part of. Knowledge is power. It doesn't matter what it is, but the more you know, the better you're going to be, the better off you're going to be, especially when it's something that affects humanity. And with that, in learning, I'm starting to change my ways.
Whatever it is we choose to do, let's start not with a few things that will feel like a sacrifice, but with what feels good and what makes us proud.
There's also this other thing that could hold us back, right? It's the fear, maybe kind of unconscious, that if we do this for real, that our friends, our family, our colleagues might not recognize us, might wonder what's happened to us.
We humans are social creatures. If you embark on an issue as important as this one, and the people who matter to you don't join along, or even worse, if they make you feel weird about it, it will feel pretty lonely. For example, imagine that at some point, like Yancy, you find you cannot continue your current job because it's too much part of the old story. If your family and friends say, "Are you crazy? You got a great job. Why in the world would you change?" Well, you might start doubting yourself. But if they know about the scale of this crisis, they might encourage you and be proud of your choices. And you might inspire them to take the next step too.
In some way, it's like a small tipping point with your families and friends, which foreshadows the greater tipping point, for our society. It's what happened with Ophélie.
Je me dis que peut-être je vais emporter des gens avec moi, je vais emporter mes parents par exemple. Et puis mes parents, ils vont peut-être faire bouger d'autres personnes. Et je me dis que en fait, la force et l'espoir, c'est ça.
Alors Ophélie, elle avait parlé de mettre des panneaux solaires. Bon, moi les panneaux solaires, c'était pas une priorité, mais bon, pour finir, on s'est laissé un peu laisser faire là-dessus, les panneaux solaires. Après, bon, aussi changer un peu tout ce qui est lampe, passer à la lampe LED, la lampe écologique. Bon, aussi on a changé. Par contre, le gros changement pour moi, c'est le compost. Je vais à la pêche et avant j'avais des grosses difficultés à récupérer 2, 3 vers de terre, que là maintenant avec le compost c'est une grosse quantité de vers de terre sans difficulté.
De plus en plus, on va vers la voie écologique, quoi. Parce que, je vous dis, on pense toujours à nos petits-enfants. On a peur que leur avenir à eux ne soit pas aussi rose qu'on le voudrait. C'est notre priorité maintenant.
En fait, je pense que ce qui leur a donné envie, c'est la façon dont je transmets ça, en fait. Je le ressens avec beaucoup de joie et beaucoup d'optimisme, en fait. Et donc, quand tu parles à quelqu'un avec autant de joie et tu vois que le changement, il est bénéfique, eh ben, en fait, ça interpelle. Et quand ils se questionnent et puis qu'on en parle, ils se disent, mais ouais, mais en fait, peut-être que moi, si je fais ça, ça va m'amener aussi des choses différentes, parce que chaque personne est différente. Mais voilà, le fait de voir ce que ça procure chez l'autre, ça questionne. Forcément, je vais pas changer la chose toute seule. Mais si moi, j'embarque quelqu'un embarque quelqu'un, et quelqu'un, et quelqu'un, et quelqu'un, et donc c'est plus une goutte dans l'océan, c'est des centaines de milliers de gouttes dans cet océan. Et là, ça bouge au final.
Ophélie has a knack for getting her family to join her, but it's not always so easy to start that conversation. So this is one of the reasons we created the week. So all you need to do is invite your friends and family or your colleagues, and then let the films do the rest.
Early on, before we even created these films, our friend Jenna used the Zoom recordings of super early versions of the week to invite a whole bunch of friends and also her mom. And at the time, she was the absolute, top leader of the leaderboard of the week. She invited over 50 of her friends and family members when the week wasn't even in a finished form. And what we found super encouraging is that, her mom was super touched. And so she in turn organized another session with her sisters, so with Jenna's aunts. And the whole family came together on this topic, and it really changed something in the family.
And perhaps you've seen this already. You can use the week in different places. There is the week at home if you want to share it with your friends and family, or the week at work so that you can invite colleagues to watch it with you. The week at campus to bring it to your school, your college, or university. The week at faith if you want to share this with your religious community or a spiritual group you belong to.
Ce qui est incroyable, c'est quand on commence à creuser le sujet écologie, comment s'engager, etc., on rencontre plein de personnes qui partagent ces convictions, cette envie d'agir. Et en plus, on reçoit tellement d'énergie et de motivation. Il faut juste avoir ce courage-là de franchir le pas. Et à la fin, le bilan en énergie, il est largement positif.
The most meaningful relationships I have outside of my family are who I work with in climate activism. When I'm like falling down of just exhaustion or feeling like none of it is working or none of it's even close enough to adequate, I just grab onto a friend and let them lift me up.
Courage is never easy. To be brave is never easy. But to know that you have people behind you, that if you fall, they'll pick you back up. You'll be okay. Just dust yourself off, move forward.
I feel a certain inspiration to like get together with like groups of people and talk about it. Not to just like dwell on the sorrow, but like what are the action steps that will help us get to where we're going?
Obviously, the week is just one tool among many, and what matters is not so much the tool, is that we're in this together and that you don't feel alone with this. And at least in our experience, when we brought this up with friends, it wasn't nearly as awkward or hard as we imagined it would be. Actually, quite a few of them told us that it was a bit of a relief because, in private, they were worried about this too, but they hadn't really found a place to go with this yet.
Psychologists have studied something called the bystander effect. Say you're in a movie theater and you start to smell smoke. People look around to see what others are doing. If no one moves, we figure we'll also stay seated, and so, well, no one moves, even though everyone inside is kind of worried. But all it takes is for one person to jump up and say, "Fire! Get out!" And everyone is relieved to join in and rush out.
It just takes someone to help others join in, and we can be that someone in our workplace, in our church, in our sports club. We have more power than we think simply by speaking up.
And yeah, we're getting to the end of this third and final episode.
And if we could, we'd love to be in the room with you and join you for this third and last conversation after the movie.
Yeah, because that's the next step, the conversation in your group. And then after the conversation, you can check out the resources and list of possible actions that we've put on the week's website.
That's it, right? Like other great generations in the past, it's our turn to write history. But we have to face it, like we're in a race against time, right? No one will solve this for us. This is not something that we can sit out and hope that some politician will solve for us at the last second.
There are parts of me that when I look at the projections around climate change, I feel overwhelmed. But I can help affect these 180 acres. I can do that. I can talk to other people.
When I look out at the farm and and I see my children, sweet and healthy and happy, and I see what together we've been able to provide, and I feel proud of myself because thus far I'm succeeding in my responsibilities.
Pour moi, c'est même pas une option envisageable de revenir en arrière de ce que j'ai pu construire. Pour moi, c'est acquis et quand je suis pas alignée, je suis pas moi. Et aujourd'hui, dans la vie, j'ai besoin vraiment d'être moi à 100%.
There's this purpose that we share that is transcendent. There's this sense of meaning and like a purpose that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. I imagine it's like what people felt in World War II. They had this common enemy and everybody was in it for the greater good. Je crois vraiment à cette courbe du changement où on dit qu'il suffit de 10% de personnes pour faire changer une organisation. Peut-être on va doucement mais sûrement arriver à ces 10% de la population.
I think that the groundswell is gonna come from people who are otherwise just, I'm an ordinary person, there's nothing special about me, that just do something. And then they're leaning on other people that also take a step forward to do something.
Well, what's the point? If you can't fight for it, what's the point? Why bother?
Where else we're gonna go? Mars? No. They're not, we can walk. So fight for it.
Jeder soll das tun, was er machen kann. Er soll ein gutes Beispiel sein. Er soll so handeln, als ob alle anderen das auch machen. Und je mehr etwas machen, desto machtvoller wird diese Bewegung.
I think the problem that we have is we underestimate the power of an individual. Because each individual person contributes to the wider society, and we have to recognize that and use that power. We have to speak out and be vocal, and not let ourselves be consumed by apathy.
On est capable aussi de changer le monde, en fait. Ça, moi, je suis persuadée. Faut juste se donner les moyens.
I often think about what I will tell my kids down the road. I want to be able to tell them that I did what was in my power, to protect them and their future, and that I wasn't alone.
Just remember, no blame, no shame, no shoulds. Let's try to stay honest with each other about the scale of the issue, but then let's start with what feels the most exciting and the most meaningful and the most impactful.
And yeah, please, feel free to send us a message through the Week's website, if you want to share a bit about your journey. Like, we'd love to hear from you. But yeah, it's hard to end this, but I guess, what's left is to wish you a wonderful conversation. And maybe more broadly, to wish you, just like we wish ourselves, that the next years of your life may be the most fascinating and meaningful years, despite the fact, or precisely because we face this incredible challenge.
So it's hard to end, but it's not really the end, because we'll see you in a minute for the group conversation. Yeah.
Okay, well, you made it through 3 different videos and you had the opportunity to maybe take in some new information that you had not known. Perhaps those are things that are impressed upon you. Perhaps some of the things might seem a little bit either unrealistic, or it might be exaggerated, or it might be undersold, depending upon where we live. I think different parts of the world face different issues where they are. And so we're sitting here in Ohio, and so we address the issue from where we live. And so I just want to kind of open it up and see if you had any observations on this final video, or if you had any other observations from previous episodes that you'd like to mention. Observations, questions, pushbacks, whatever you might. It's a wide open conversation for a few moments. Anybody have anything? Anything?
I do.
Yeah.
When we volunteer at the food pantry and we pick up food at stores and we bring it to the food pantry, and it may be day old, but it's not wasting food. It's helping, as the name of the program is, it's Meal Connect. It's connecting food with people who need it. So you're not wasting food resources. And a lot of times we're picking up produce. It's, they can't sell anymore. Little, bananas might be, but we're recycling and getting food to where it's needed, so it's not being wasted. And I know at the Perry Center, as well as at the McKinley Center, you got furniture recycling, clothing recycling, shoes being recycled. Just like that one lady said, she's buying used clothes. She's not buying new clothes anymore. There are so many good places, thrift stores, Salvation Army, Goodwill, and, really nice used clothing stores where you can go get clothes and you don't have to buy new. And, so you're saving the planet. But I think sometimes we do things and we don't even realize that we are doing something for the planet.
Today I was at the McKinley and was talking to Marianne, who does the women's clothing. She had several blouses, I guess you call them women's blouses. One was a lot of them had still had the tags on it. And one was at $89. It was the cost of this blouse. And she had several of them. So there's a lot of, like you say, there's a lot of nice stuff, good stuff that you can pick up there. You may have to spend a little more time looking at things, but it's worth it.
It is. I agree with you because I do that. I mean, I go to the thrift.
I've bought clothes, pants, and shirts and that at the Goodwill and the Savers, the thrift stores. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't buy new jeans. I buy jeans there because heck, I'm not going to pay $60-$80 for jeans.
And they're ripped anyhow. So
Yeah, they're ripped. Yeah. And
so what's the difference?
Yeah. I did that when I was a kid. I'm not doing that now.
No.
So, and then the other thing is I remember my mom, she lived in Altoona, which was 50 miles from Pittsburgh, and they would go shopping in Pittsburgh. And she said, when the steel mills were really running like they were, it was dark in the daytime. The street lights were on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so like all that pollution and smog and stuff. It was really, really something.
You know what I liked about this video? I think it broke it down into 5 different areas that will be different connecting points for different people. I think when we address this topic, a lot of times the focus is put on individuals. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? That type of thing. When in reality, I think it's a varied approach that will help in the overall process. There are individual things that we can do, but there are community things that we can do. There is government. The idea of just even understanding where some of the people that we put into office, where are their sensitivities for the common good, rather than just for a specialized interest group, is all of that I think plays together. And so, I more than anything else, it's kind of being conscious of it and trying to proactively think about this rather than just saying, well, there's nothing I can do, or, the future generations are going to have to deal with that type of thing. So that's kind of what I've taken away from these 3 videos is, individually, corporately, governmentally, all these things need to be kind of working together for achievement and progress.
At work, the presbytery is encouraging all the congregations to become Earth Care congregations.
Mm.
And they are setting up guidelines of what kind of things you can do as a congregation to qualify to be an Earth Care congregation. And then they have steps of following and trying to improve certain areas. So I'm interested in a couple of weeks, they're going to have a presentation where they're going to explain some more of what we can do as a congregation to be more earth caring and conscious type of people and as a group. So it's kind of encouraging to see that that's, you know, being thought and talked about.
Yeah, can I get like on that just for a quick second? Because something like the presbytery kind of is organizing or promoting that, individual churches then are made aware of it, whereas if it was just left up to that individual congregation, you might not
Right.
connect to that. So that's the two are working together. That's good.
And the second thing I was gonna mention is, our nephew works, with the, group called, the resale shop Common Threads. And there's 2 locations in the greater Cleveland area. He does, social media advertising for them. And, so that's one of those, you know, that's up and coming type of, it's called Common Threads.
Well, sometimes it's good to get like the government involved where there's grants to encourage companies to do things. I know in the last few years where I worked, they got the opportunity to get grants to change all the lighting throughout the entire facility, the plant, the office, and everything, to a more efficient bulb, and it was a lot of money, but a lot of it was paid for, and they knew that they wouldn't have done it otherwise, but they knew that once it was all changed over, they would save a lot of money in their electric bills. So, the grant from the government to assist them with this transformation was really the impetus to get it done.
Very good. Good ideas. Anything else that stands out to you or anything that you want to say? Go ahead.
You touched on it a little bit, but I want to touch on the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. Most of us have come out of evangelicalism, and still having friends and family members in there, and with the election year coming up, and when Trump was in office the last time, he pulled us out of the climate change stuff. And I get told all the time, well, why should we bother? Jesus is coming again, and there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and so they don't even think about it. What do you?
I think one of the things that we'll see in this new study beginning next week is when we initially see the church forming after the day of Pentecost, there was a real apocalyptic type of mentality, thinking that Jesus was going to come within that generation. The later writings in the New Testament begin to look more realistically at that, and you'll see that the tone changes in later writings, because obviously to think that Jesus is Messiah, now he's going to inaugurate his kingdom, and then there is a little bit more of an insight of saying, well, wait a minute now. No man knows the time. No man knows the date. And there seemed to be a more balancing that began to take place. But a lot of times, at least what I have seen over the course of the years, is if you hang on to that apocalyptic mentality, then you think that this place that we call home, planet Earth, is just a temporary waiting room for the better place that's to come. That just becomes an excuse, I think, of not taking care of not only the planet, but the people that need the planet to make it their home and be able to thrive as well. So I think what we see is that everything is always in process of understanding the more we know. And that's true in the New Testament, but gosh, we're 2,000 years removed from that. And now we have even deeper knowledge of different things. Is it perfect knowledge? No, but it is a better knowledge. And to be able to be stewards and to be able to say, you know what, how can I better take care of the resources that God has placed in my hands? Do I make sure that I, put it into the hands of other people who need it rather than just throwing it away, since I have the resources to be able just throw it away and replace it? Are there better ways of helping others? And so that's a little side note, but I think you're right, Shelley. I think that a lot of times there is that apocalyptic mentality and it's stopped there. Jesus is coming, so why even care about it? That type of thing. And I just kind of think that's the wrong way of looking at the topic.
Yep.
So,
But when is he coming? It could be 200 years from now.
yeah.
Could be
You know.
2,000 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other things, anything else you want to talk about before we close this topic?
2,000 before.
If not, thank you for participating in it. And
Thank you for sharing this with us.
yeah, I hope it's been helpful.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you soon and have a good rest of the night.
All right.
You too. Night.
Good night.
Bye.